In this episode, I will continue talking about how those who survived the connection evolved to fill their quickly changing environment. Again, I will talk about 5 plants and 5 animals. Also in this episode, I'll be playing with mixing words to give species a unique name, to avoid multiple species having the same nickname. We will start with Trandifer, with the first generation being made up of dual cornu and teres corpus. Dual cornu. Cornu is essentially the same as Trandifer, the biggest difference being the 2 large horns on the back of cornu, similar to the thagomizers of a stegosaurus. These play a defensive role. These help prevent, or at least restrict, animals like Debilis venenum or Tria maxilla from damaging cornu. Cornu also has some behavioral changes, being a bit more aggressive, especially around mating season. Cornu has flatter teeth, better suited for eating their differed diet of mostly grassy plants and some shorter plants with a few fruit. Cornu is also a bit bigger than Trandifer. Teres corpus. Teres is almost the exact same as Trandifer, with only having a larger flap of skin around the arm to assist with its movement, making it faster. Teres's gray sensor has less segments, which naturally means that they have a worse sense of hearing and smell than Trandifer. The second generation is made up of quad cornu, parum fructus commendentis, and dentis armiger. Quad cornu. Quad cornu has double the horns of dual cornu, and the gray sensor of quad cornu has evolved for better hearing. At the end of quad cornu's arm, a small claw is present, the exact same as Acuta palmis, just smaller. Quad cornu has reduced both the intake of small plants and fruit in its diet, subsisting most of its diet off grassy plants. For this, quad cornu has longer teeth to help deal with the constant grinding of plants. Quad cornu also no longer has the signature orange skin flap that all of Trandifer has to some capacity. Parum fructus commendentis. Parum is much smaller than its ancestors, and has a darker pigmentation to assist with hiding from predators within the forested areas of the cup. The gray sensor of Parum is significantly shorter, and with it, its sense of smell and hearing has reduced. Its hearing not so much, as the sensor is heavily biased for hearing, to the point where Parum can barely smell anything more than a few micrometers away, rather than Trandifer's 120 to 130 micrometer distance. While its size and senses have reduced, Parum is significantly faster at reproducing, being the biggest reason for their survival. Dentis armiger. Armiger's biggest difference from any animal with a gray sensor is that it doubles as a tusk. While the upper parts are made up of 12 segments, making it quite flexible, the lower 2/3 are made up of only 2 segments, only one making up a significant portion of the sensor. This sensor is useful for fights, for all Armiger has to do is make sure that the target is in front of it. To help with this, the front sensor is entirely dedicated to hearing, while the second pair of sensors are largely dedicated to smell, but still hear. Which means that Armiger is great at hearing. Armiger also has large teeth to help with eating bigger plants strip by strip. The third generation is only made up of Unis, multorum, calvum. Calvum is covered in 17 horns, including the ones on the hands. Including the head structure, almost all of Trandifer have its 18 horns. Calvum has an extra claw on its hand, being the potential start of a second digit. Calvum's diet is 100% made up of grassy plants, grazing the fields for food in small herds. Calvum has more muscular arms, using them more for defending themselves. To help with this, the shoulders of Calvum are more flexible to assist in reaching whatever problems Calvum has. Calvum is the dominant species. Next, we will see the descendants of Pentenalida. The first generation is made up of Silique quinque and multilegumen. Silique quinque. Silique is slightly smaller than Pentenalida, but is also faster. Silique has a better sense of smell thanks to the more what could be called rungs on the now longer arm of Silique. Silique also, most significantly, has 2 additional pods to release at any given time. Sadly for predators, these pods are smaller than previously. Multilegumen. Legumen also has an improved sense of smell, thanks to the same reason. But unlike Silique, there are more of the front rungs of the smaller arm, basically meaning that legumen has more fingers, 5 more to be specific. The pods of legumin have also undergone change. There are only 2 pods to be released by an individual arm, but these 2 are different sizes, starting the evolution of dynamic pods. Legumin also has a 4th pair of tendrils following behind, these 2 being smaller than all the others. Legumin has moved to more arid and hot environments, basically filling in for Breous Herbes. To help cope with the heat, the tendrils are longer to lose more heat. This also makes legumin faster. The second generation is made up of Maculosus, dwarf silique, and Giganharina Ctor. Maculosus. Maculosus is a wonderfully colored species. While the body and large arm of Maculosus is striped, the tendrils fade with color and widen at the end. The ends also have a pinkish purple and gray eye spots. These help with the typical predators that Maculosus has to deal with, like Venenum fox, who, after seeing the eye spots, might just think their cover is blown and will avoid the hunt altogether. These don't help against the blind, though. But where these eye spots really shine is when Maculosus is gathering soda, because thanks to the new colonization of the previously very empty waters, or sodas, there are plenty of predators in these waters, most namely Oases facies. While drinking, Maculosus will stretch its tendrils as far from the body as possible, making the eye spots highly visible, which helps to deter Oases facies, but not Unentaintus crocodilius or Balticus. Dwarf silique. Dwarf silique, or duilique, is about 1/4 of the size of silique. Duilique's newly added white fur allows it to live in the currently also being colonized tundra, where it gets to eat the few corpses of Coryzarino, but also another species we will talk about in the next future Descendants episode. To help cope with the frigid temperatures, duilique on its tendrils has these nubs. Instead of placing its eggs on top of its body, duilique places them on its bottom tendril, where these nubs help protect the eggs from freezing and or falling, where it can't last more than 2 minutes before freezing. The eggs are also darker to absorb more heat. The front smaller arm is about as long as the rest of the body and is covered in more rungs and finger-like rung. The paws that duilique releases are so small that they wouldn't get a predator to stop their hunt, but these are edible to other duilique. Mothers use these to help feed their kids. Duilique also will take care of their kids until they are adults, when they will leave on their own. Duilique is also rarely ever aggressive, even being willing to share a big enough space with a group of Coryzarinos. To reproduce, duilique cannot use the typical method of finding a mate. What they do is females wait in some protected area and the males will go out searching for them. Giganharina Ctor. Ctor is the largest of Pentenalida's descendants by a long shot. The back tendrils of Ctor have undergone great diversification. The top pair are used for heat exchange, having 2 dewlaps filled with blood vessels. And the bottom 2 have small spikes in the end of them. These are not only used to simply scratch Ctor, but also to help fight for territory. The smaller arms have more rungs, but the fingers even have their own rungs. The breathing apparatus of Ctor has undergone a massive change. Instead of breathing through their keratin-plated mouths, they have special breathing holes with small hairs to clear debris. The pod system of Ctor has become more advanced now, having pods for any situation, small gray ones to feed kids, a medium-sized red pod for smaller predators, and a big cyan pod for bigger predators. With these bigger pods, Ctor has come across an extreme version of the same problem that Breous Herbes had in the past, where the pod is too big and well connected to just leave and ends up causing bleeding and pain. Although Ctors are bigger, so this problem is more severe. Ctor lays its eggs in places deep in the deserts known as dead zones. These are where only one form of life prevails, Ango Radus. Thanks to Ango killing all the plants, the lack of soda, and the extreme heat, no animal even bothers to live in such extreme conditions. And Ctor is free to lay its hardened eggs in the dead zones, where the kids develop, hatch, and only the strongest can survive. Ctor, even as babies, are cannibals, and cannibalism is the only reason babies can survive for any amount of time within the dead zone. But once a Ctor has made it out of the dead zone, there is not much to threaten them, only the occasional defending Desertum and Cola and a predator we will talk about on a later date. Ctor is the dominant species. Next, we will see the descendants of Moltus Chell. The first descendants are Fragosus ungula, Ambulado ungula, and Ingens ungula. Fragosus ungula. Fragosus ungula, or frungula, like all other descendants of Moltus Chell, has significantly less arms, only having 10 rather than 36. The top 4 arms aid in movement, making frungula faster than Moltus Chell. Fragosus has 2 serrated claws. Frungula is now an omnivore, subsisting on a small portion of meat when it can. Ambuladio ungula. Ambuladio ungula, or angula, is the only member of Coelurra, both living and dead, to walk. The major trade-off between walking and the floating style movement is that although walking takes more energy, it's significantly faster. To help with the walking, Angula's walking claws are blunt, wide, and can open a whole 180 degrees, allowing for very stable movement. Angula only has 6 arms rather than the 36 of Moltus Chell. Angula is smaller than Moltus Chell. The structure of the non-walking claws have changed as well. These simply grab food better than the smaller claws of Moltus Chell. Ingens ungula. Ingens ungula, or ingula, has a darker complexion to help blend into the dark more, for ungula is nocturnal. Ingula also has 10 arms, the same as frungula. Most of these claws are small, dull, and overall useless, only being used for more movement, but the 2 that are normal are bigger than Moltus Chell's. The second generation is made up of Unis ungula, Titanum lussus demutador, and Pallidus rhizus. Unis ungula. Unis has even fewer limbs than before, only having 8 arms. The longer arms of Unis hold claws that are long and have a sharp point and have quick closing muscles. They mostly only gather food, the food in question having both figuratively and literally little competition: feces. These claws shovel and, well, the mouth swallows. These claws can be used to defend themselves. In fact, using these claws will often get the attacker sick, basically being poisoned. But for defense that gets predators hurt now and not hours later after the fight, they use 3 things. The passive defense they have is the feces stuck to their skin, teeth, and claws. The smell repulses some predators, meaning that they never even consider getting close to Unis, not even considering them food. 2, they use the ragged, serrated claws to rip and tear at flesh. But if the predator is unaffected or too dangerous to fight, they have one final result. By vomiting, Unis creates such a foul, disgusting, and repulsive smell that any predator with a sense of smell will run or slither or float away at the smell. Titanum lussus demutador. Demutador is the biggest Coelurra species to ever exist, including prehistoric ones. And unlike most others, Demutador, thanks to all of Coelurra's generational trauma and suffering, chooses violence at any turn. 4 claws are used for movement, and the other 4 are used to gather food. And food includes not just plants in the already dead. Anything that Demutador feels it wants to eat, it will float over and tear them apart. In fact, Demutador is also the most violent Coelurra member in history, instantly being willing to fight any foe. But predators like Venenum Fox or Duplex Maxilla can't even hunt Demutador if they wanted to, for they're too short to reach the body reasonably, and Demutador can simply raise its arms out of reach. 2 arms are used to gather another means of food, pollination. They gather the nectar the same way Pentenulita and its descendants gather soda, and the pollen gets stuck along with it. Demutador also has more teeth. Pallidus rhizus. Pallidus is a cave-dwelling species, and is a scavenger of the caves, and is just one of the organisms we will talk about that have colonized the caves. Pallidus has even less arms, only having 6, 4 of which are used for movement, and the other 2 gather food and defend. Although they are mostly scavengers, thanks to one adaptation, no Pallidus will ever starve. They are capable of eating sugar rocks off the cave walls, being one of the very few who can do so. They simply scrape the sugar-coated walls and eat. The next group of descendants are from Kulum Arani. The first generation is made up of Ludius Arani and Antrum Arani. Ludius Arani. Bulbas Arani, or Lorani, has changed the color of its skin to fit in with the folium that surrounds it. Lorani has longer legs than Kulum Arani to help run from its newfound predators. Kulum Arani could get away with such short legs because of the fact that only one predator hunted them, and that one predator can't move. The 4 vestigial structures on the end of Kulum Arani have turned into 4 prongs that help protect Lorani a little bit. Lorani's head has widened and the body has slimmed. The eyes have swapped sizes. Instead of 1 bigger eye and 2 smaller ones, Lorani has 2 bigger ones and 1 small one. This helps improve their depth perception. The gray sensors of Lorani are shorter but contain more segments, meaning that their senses haven't changed. The sensors have also darkened and are partially brown to help camouflage. Antworm Arani. Antworm also has elongated legs. All of Antworm's eyes are the same size. The camouflage of Antworm has actually gotten worse due to Antworm's nocturnal nature and that Antworm spends a decent portion of its time within caves for both reproduction and sleep. Antworm's vestigial parts have reduced in size and are more compact. The second generation is made up of Pigmentum demutador, Gestiosponda, and Caverna ambulator. Pigmentum demutador. Pigmentum has a great new ability greatly enhancing its ability to camouflage, the ability to change colors. Now this is rather slow, so Pigmentum can't use this to change colors on the fly, but it can change colors to blend into a certain environment better, or a specific plant it's sleeping at. It can change between orange, blue, green, and white, and any combination of those colors. Although the mandibles, sensors, legs, and back prongs can't change colors due to none of them being covered in skin. But the legs have an extra range of mobility and can now be hidden under Pigmentum's body, and the sensors have further reduced in size to the point where now its sense of smell has gotten significantly worse. Its hearing has not, because the sensors have focused on hearing now. Pigmentum also heavily relies on its vision to find food and to avoid becoming it. Its third eye is tiny now and can't see the same range of colors that the 2 big ones can. The mandible shape change helps not only make Pigmentum's bite stronger, but also has more grip on food or anything it's attacking. Gestiosponda. Gestio has even longer legs than before, further enhancing its ability to run. Gestio's mandibles have increased in size to provide a stronger bite. The prongs on Gestio are tiny, but can be easily broken. The eyes of Gestio are smaller and can't see nearly as far. These are thanks to Gestio's crepuscular nature. Gestio's sense of smell, though, has improved with its sense of hearing having gotten worse. This whole mismatch of traits has led Gestio's downfall, leading it to extinction. Caverna ambulator. Caverna is the most unique of all. The body has changed drastically, being a faint blue towards the head and torso, but quickly fades to white towards the rear. The legs of Caverna have undergone extreme specialization. The front 2 now have a single digit. This helps with balance and climbing uneven surfaces of the walls of its new cave environment. And the back 2 have an extra plate of flat chitin, and the legs have bigger, stronger muscles. The legs are extra flexible. These are not only for the ability to jump, but to jump well, allowing Caverna to get away from danger we will talk about soon, or to simply reach a point of interest. The head has many changes. Caverna has not only 2 giant eyes, but also the pupils are enlarged to improve vision in darker sections of the cave. The sensors have gotten incredibly longer, not only improving Caverna's sense of smell and hearing, but the ends are built to be able to whip and slash at opponents. Whether this is a predator or an opposing Caverna depends. Caverna's head features 2 red spots on the sides. These help determine the fitness of the Caverna and overall health. These help both females determine what males they want to mate with, but also vice versa. Caverna also lives in colonies so big and spread out that only 1, 2, maybe 3 can fit in a cave. Caverna's mating has undergone significant change. The males find a place to make a nest made from dried, dead plants as a structural base, bones placed on top of those to show the great scavenging and hunting skills of the male, and skin on top to make it all comfy, or in the very few habitable caves who have it available, fur. places of choice are either places out of reach of their predator or places where there's a high population of Palmis rhizus, not only meaning that there's less of a chance that the predator will attack them, but also the Palmis smooth out the walls due to their sugar-eating habits. This also means that the males might try to entice a Palmis to stay around or even help. Although these two can't communicate very well, Palmis does understand roughly what some of the chirps of Caverna mean, mostly as a means of avoiding those who are pissed and ready to attack. But also to listen for the ones who want a Palmis around. As a sort of trade, Caverna will provide protection, food, and if the Palmis needs it, a place to raise young. And the Palmis will smooth out the walls of the nest. But nest building is a whole problem. To get the dried plants, bone, and skin, males will have to exit their cave and find dead plants or animals to carry back, or hunt for said plants and animals. This is also why fur is super rare to see in their nests, for only the upper caves that are inhabited have access to it. But after building the nest, the male will loudly announce that he is finished for the next day or two. The females now walk around looking for the biggest or most impressive, comfy, and prettiest nest with the healthiest male and choose that one. But if the female is not healthy or just doesn't fit the male's bill, the males do reject them. Both sides are pretty picky. Males with the Palmis are also of choice because this also proves health and communication skills, because communication with a blind, less intelligent animal who barely understands a chirp is a very difficult and infuriating task. But once the male and female have accepted each other, they mate for life, being a monogamous species. Even if the nest gets destroyed, they stick together, and even if their mate dies, the Caverna will simply not mate for the rest of its life. Sometimes. The next species descendants we are looking at is Palmis. The first generation is made up of Ctor brachium and Lenus ferrum. Ctor brachium. Ctor features a split on the end of its third arm into 3 nubs. These can simply grab objects better, the objects in question mostly being an egg. The blades of Ctor are not only larger but also darker. Ctor also features sharper teeth to help with eating tougher plants. And like all other descendants of Palmis, Ctor no longer has an orange flap. Lenus ferrum. Lenus is overall the same as Palmis, but the blade has not only changed shape but is also darker and is not as sharp. The third arm of Lenus is also longer. Lenus is also less aggressive than Palmis. The second generation is made up of Unis ambulans, Caverna rex, and Rimor sensorum. Unis ambulans. Unis is quite unique, now being the second animal to ditch floating for walking. Unis now has its claw acts more like a boot or shoe. These claws, although duller, still have quite a sharp point, and even without it, it'd be like getting hit with a hammer. To assist in defending itself, Unis has evolved a more broad range of motion to the shoulder, but also its third arm can reach under itself and grab whatever it needs to. This is more to scare an enemy rather than actually damage them. They also use these for territorial disputes. Caverna rex. Caverna rex, or just C. rex, is not only the dominant species of this genus, but also the dominant animal in the caves. C. rex is far bigger than not just other Palmis descendants, but most other animals. And to cope with this size, Caverna is an omnivore, eating whatever plants or animals he can catch. For C. rex, that includes plants we will talk about later, Palmis and Caverna. Also, other younger females or any male is on the dinner table. Now, when it comes to the strengths of C. rex, it varies between the males and the females. The two are very different. While the males aren't much bigger than previous Audas, the females are massive, bigger than most other animals. And while the males often subsist off plants with the occasional meat, females are mostly carnivores, eating mostly meat with some plants. The females will take control of some larger cavern within the cave, and that will be her territory. Some females can't even leave their territory due to them being so big, and the female will make it as comfy as possible for her. But when the unsuspecting Caverna or Palmis enters the room, C. rex will attack, and the successful hunt rate for a C. rex female is astonishing, being 94%. And C. rex will waste none of the body, even eating some Palmis whole. For the males, life is quite a bit more difficult. The males are much smaller than the females and as such are far weaker. While the hunting success rate for Palmis is still impressive, being 78%, the success rate for Caverna is much smaller, being around 51%. Although the males are smaller and weaker, they do have two major advantages, one being a spine on the end of the third arm helping assist in fights, and two being that they don't really even have territories, just wandering the caves in search of food and mates, where about 60% of C. rex male deaths occur. The males, in order to subdue the female, will have to bring her food, often hunting the biggest they can find just to eat none of it. The females will at first be aggressive, being ready to kill and eat the male, but she will smell the food and understand that the male might have mating potential. She will eat and then pick up the male to feel for two things: his weight to get an idea on how much he's been eating recently, and these 4 nubs at the end. The fatter these are, the healthier and stronger the male is. If she deems the male not fit enough for mating, she will kill the male either with a bite to the head or stab him really anywhere, unless the male is within 13% of males who escape their deaths. But if the female deems a male worthy of mating, she will allow him to stay around, eat any scraps that may be laying around from the food he brought in, and all he has to do is avoid getting in her way, and wait for her to fall asleep where he can finally actually mate with her, because he can actually reach her now. The female will carry the 3 or 4 eggs instead of what used to be 1 or 2, and when they hatch, they're all forced out of the cave, not just by the female, but any other males or females that find the young kids. And something that plagues all creatures that live in the caves, including Palmis and Caverna, is that a portion or even all the kids must be evicted from the cave so as to not cause overpopulation and inbreeding. For all 3 of these, they wait till the cover of night and go wandering, often taking days to find a new cave to live in. Many die in these cruel few days. But sometimes the adults often have to leave as well. With Palmis and Caverna, this often causes no real issue to the surface. But when an adult female sea rex gets evicted from a cave, it gets rough, often causing complete decimation of local populations of both plants and animals. Only the very big and very small are left behind. Rimor sensorum. Rimor is a pure predator of the surface with an exceptional sense of smell. Rimor's gray sensor has an extra section. This section is dedicated to smelling to enhance its sense of smell. Rimor's teeth are sharp and pointed for an enhanced ability to grab a hold of prey. Rimor's primary way of killing his prey is by grabbing it with its jaws and sensors and leaving the prey there till it bleeds out, occasionally stabbing it with its blade. After the prey is dead, Rimor uses its blade to cut up the body and make it easier for the relatively thin, brittle teeth to chew through. This method of eating only really works on small prey, and Rimor also has gotten smaller. Female Rimors will carry its eggs all the way until they hatch. The next species we will look into is Bulbas Folium, with the first generation being made up of Maculosus bulbus, Ledentigi bulbus, Fragilis bulbus, and Aquio bulbus. Maculosus bulbus. Maculosus bulbus, or Maculbus, is quite unique amongst the plants, having 8 glowing dots on the bulbs. These dots only glow bright at night. During the day, they just glow faintly. These do allow for photosynthesis, not to the degree where Maculbus can photosynthesize from itself and survive off that, but if enough are around, they can all use each other to photosynthesize and survive, allowing Maculbus to live in places like caves, but only towards the entrance where soda is readily accessible. Maculbus is also taller than Bulbus and has a deeper reaching root system. Lentigni bulbus. Lentigni bulbus, or lentignus, is very similar to Maculbus. The only real difference is that the glowing dots don't replace the black spots, and that lentignus is still just as tall as Bulbas Folium. Other than that, it shares the same traits. Lentignus is just not as big or as good at hiding as Maculbus, and therefore would be outcompeted and would go extinct. Fragilis bulbus. Fragilis bulbus, or Fragilibus, is very similar to Bulbas Folium, only having a thinner stem, smaller leaves, and much bigger roots. These all letting Fragilibus live in drier environments. Aquio bulbus. Aquio bulbus, or Aquibus, is much taller than Bulbas Folium was. and most distinctly the leaves have flattened, making them more like normal leaves. And the hole for releasing the spores is located only in the bottom of these leaves, and the black spots are nowhere to be found. The skin of Aquibus is tougher than that of Bulbas Folium. The second generation is made up of Fervens Orbus, Caligo Bulbus, Caldus Bulbus, Grandis Radix, and Frigid Fronds. Fervens Orbus. Fervens is much taller than previously. And instead of 2 large leaves, now Fervens has 2 brightly glowing spheres, and the hole for releasing spores is located on either side of the stem, and Fervens only lives within caves. Fervens is the most important species within the caves, being the reason almost all other organisms that reside in them can do so. Fervens obviously provides light for Caverna to see, hunt, and hide, but this light also provides light for other plants, both ones we will talk about and ones we've already talked about to survive in the caves, only if there's a body of soda within the cave, but still incredible. These plants, along with Fervens, will eventually die or get killed and now will supply a layer of easy-to-grow and substrate for medium-sized plants. Taller, tree-like plants are still rare, but still happen. And these plants attract 3 major animals, Durum facies, Luteus pfister, and Caerulum pfister. The chemical reaction for the bioluminescence itself helps the caves. Along with light, the chemical reaction emits heat. This prevents the cave from getting cold. So now an uninhabited cave can be anywhere from 70 to 50 degrees depending on their location. Those same caves can now be as hot as 81 or at the coldest 64 degrees. And with the substrate being made of dead plants, feces, and rotting flesh, warmer caves are often quite humid, making them almost tropical without the sun. This substrate layer provides food and shelter for decomposers and detritivores, both ones we have and haven't talked about. Many of these aren't even truly native to the caves, but only help the environment by breaking down the substrate layer into even more fertile ground, allowing medium-sized plants to grow. And the act of almost constantly releasing spores, most of what they release is just air with some spores, only usually being around 30% spore. Along with the winds outside the cup help ventilate the air within the caves. And this also helps spread the other plants' spores. Fervens is the dominant species. Caligo bulbus. Caligo has much darker leaves compared to the stem, unlike the mostly even coloring before. Caligo has many fibrous roots and smaller tuberous roots. Caligo is a bit taller than previously. Other than those, it's practically the same. Caldus bulbus. Caldus resides in only the savanna-like environments in the small areas that vary in conditions around the year. Caldus has very small bulbs and a taller stem, both of which are much darker than previously. Caldus has a large root for storing soda during drier times. Grandis radix. Grandis radix, or Grandix, is taller than its ancestors. Grandix's roots actually vary in height. For those living in the swamp, the roots are much taller to help prevent the stem from being submerged. But the ones in the plains often don't have as tall of roots, but everything else is the same. The leaves are longer and much darker. Frigid fronds. Frigid fronds, or frinds, resides in the upper, colder portions of the cup, where both Duilique and Corizarino reside. These two can take refuge under Frinz's roots. Frinz can gain the nutrients of what Corizo and Duilique leave behind, and the two get some shelter. A simple yet effective symbiotic relationship. The leaves of Frinz are shorter and the stem starts off dark then turns white towards the base. Frinz is also bigger. The next descendants come from Dandr Flora, the first generation being made up of Suspendium taurus and Colorius Dandr Flora. Suspendium taurus. Suspendium is bigger than Dandr Flora. Suspendium's arms don't immediately start to coil or spiral, starting off straight at first. Suspendium also only hangs from the ceiling. Colorius Dandr Flora. Colorius is taller than Dandr Flora. The thin quote-unquote leaves of Calorius now have chlorophyll, making it capable of photosynthesis. Also meaning that Calorius has moved out from the cave and onto a wide variety of environments. Due to Dandr Flora being the least soda-reliant plant in either cup by a long shot, and Calorius doesn't have many surfaces to lose its soda, so Calorius can survive in a massive area in the cup while having even more potential growing habitats prevented by Ango Radus. To list the places they can survive in, varying soda level environments, savanna environments, the plains, both open and forested, anywhere not submerged in the swamps, and the tundra. Not being able to survive in the desert because of Ango, deep desert because of the heat and because of Ango, in the Arctic environments due to the cold. Also, due to Calorius' stem being extra difficult to eat and burrow through, and it having next to no nutrients, Calorius is rara-proof. The second generation is made up of Luteus concatus, Gigans Calorius Dandr Flora, and Condidus Dandr Flora. Luteus concatus. Concatus' stem ends with a bulb filled with nutrients. Concatus' arms serve two new purposes, one being photosynthesis, since now, with the introduction of light into the cave, Concatus can photosynthesize, and its arms now end with photogears to do so. But the rest of the arms not only release their powdery spores, but also absorb water from the air. These allow Concatus not only to not die after reproduction, but make Concatus much more abundant in the caves than Dandr Flora ever could be, some caves having whole hanging ceilings. Concatus also replaces a large portion of the sugar that it removed while growing. They do this for the few spores it releases from its root that will replace the parent plant. And as Concatus' roots retract, they replace the sugar slowly but surely until it eventually falls and becomes food for sediment. Concatus replaces about 70 to 80% of the sugar it used. Gigans Calorius Dandr Flora. Gigans Calorius Dandr Flora, or Galorius Dandr Flora, is quite a bit taller than before. And the spiral stems or leaves, really whatever you want to call them, are darker and rest inside a little cup. This cup gathers and pools soda. The soda can be intaken by both Galorius Dandr Flora or any animal capable of reaching the soda. Galorius Dandr Flora's stem cannot reasonably be eaten by any animal. It's simply too big for small herbivores, too tough and nutrient-poor for medium-sized animals, and rara radialis stella, and too nutrient-poor for the largest animals, being so nutrient-poor that it takes more energy to digest them than the energy you get back. Galorius Dandr Flora has also some fibrous roots. Condidus Dandr Flora. Condidus has most of its stem except for the base covered with chlorophyll, assisting in photosynthesis. Condidus has more stems and is a bit bigger than previously. Condidus has an extra wide top to hold all the stems. While Condidus is no longer truly rara-proof, it does have a defense against other problems. Condidus produces capsaicin, the same chemical that makes peppers spicy. So Condidus, while also being less nutrient-filled than other plants, it also burns to eat. This spice is also present in their spores, meaning that they are both real hot and real sensitive to heat. All Dandr Flora descendants' spores still have their gunpowder-like properties. Just with Condidus, it has a much stronger smell to it. The next species descendants we are looking at is the only, Ango Radus, being one of the most destructive organisms to ever grace the cup. Its evolution is very important. The first and only generation is made up of Dux X Cultus and Pronus Ango Radus. Dux X Cultus. Dux X, or Dux X, is a fascinating evolution of Ango. Dux X now grows in cooler, wetter climates. Dux X is capable of killing everything, but it leaves two different species of plant to grow directly around itself. At first, this might seem great. One of these plants provides defense from herbivores eating Dux X and the other plant, which directly protects Dux X from being eaten and spreads the other two's spores. And Dux X protects them from other plants, causing competition. This might seem fine, but this is heavily sided for Dux X. First of all, the reproduction of all three of these plants is done by one. This one bears fruit. This fruit contains the seeds of the plant it grows from, the spores of duck sex, and the spores of the other. But the ratio between the spores of duck sex and the spores of the other plant is not even. For every 1,000 duck sex spores, there's 100 of the other plant spores. And there's usually about 3,400 spores for duck sex. The amount of seeds of the fruiting plant is even cut into by duck sex. What should be in the 30s is no more than 15 seeds. And if the other plant produces its spores and releases them without the fruit, or the fruiting plant rejects duck sex spores for more of its own seeds, they will be killed by duck sex. Second of all the nutrients absorbed and made by the other plants are immediately intaken by duck sex. Then only a certain amount is given to the other plants, to keep them just the right size and for duck sex to control how, why, and where they all grow. Third of all, the other two plants are used only to protect duck sex, meaning if an herbivore like Unis walks by, the other two would be eaten before duck sex ever would. And fourth of all, if a drought hits the group, duck sex will first kill the plant that directly protects it and the one responsible for the other's reproduction. And if it gets worse, duck sex will kill the other plant, for duck sex is fully capable of surviving without its group. And in fact, it had to for a while, because the relationships it's in aren't from the first generation species. Duck sex also has a crown of thorns on top of it. Pronus Ango Radus. Pronus Ango, or Prongo, is almost identical to previous Ango, only now it's flatter, requiring even less soda, about a third of the soda. This also means that Prongo can move further down the cup. And while its territory definitely expanded, even being able to survive at the very bottom of the cup, which reaches temperatures with a low of 100 degrees Fahrenheit and a high of 106 degrees Fahrenheit, it still resides in the upper portions that it did before. And while Prongo and duck sex occasionally see each other, in which case the two will try to strangle each other out, where Prongo wins about 92% of the time and duck sex only wins about 8% of the time, the two don't cross paths often. Prongo is the dominant species. The next species we will look into is Serum Pomy, whose first generation is made up of Dandr Flora, Curvus stipes, and Calum. Dandr Flora. Dandr is a bit taller than Serum Pomy. Dandr has a few leaves drooping down to assist with the previously mediocre photosynthesis levels with Serum Pomy. Curvus stipes. Stipes is essentially just Serum Pomy, but leaning further to the side, although stipes is better in hotter climates than Dandr Flora. Calum. Tila, instead of just one straight stem, and instead has many interconnected stems with as many as 4 fruit. Tila is also bigger and taller than Serum Pomy. The second generation is made up of Duo Fructus, Inflexus stipes, and Avarium ex cultus. Duos Fructus, or ductus, has 2 fruit. These fruit are not only slightly smaller, but have a more green tint to them. Ductus also has some leaves close to the bottom of the plant, similar to Prustrum. Ductus is also taller and is the dominant species. Inflexus stipes. Inflexus is very similar to Serum Pomy still, just leaning even further, and having leaf-like structures around the fruit. Also, the bottom portion of the stem is lighter. Inflexus hasn't changed much from its original form 2 generations ago, and so Inflexus would be outcompeted by other plants within the cup. Avarium ex cultus. Avarium is a hybrid plant between Dandr Flora and Calum, having the leaves of Dandr and the body of Tila. Avarium also has leaves growing up and ending in a disc. Avarium also has more fruit, having up to 7 fruit. Avarium is bigger than previously. Avarium is one of the 2 plants that is in a relationship with duck sex, being the reproducer and growing directly around duck sex to protect it. About 76% of avariums are stuck in a relationship with duck sex, 24% being the lucky ones. The final species descendants we will talk about are Breous Herbes. The first generation being made up of Spica herba, Altus herba, and Acer herba. Spica herba. Spica is very similar to Brevis, only now its leaves rest on short and wide stumps. The leaves of Spica are dull now, but many large thorns make up for such a change. And like all other descendants of Brevis, in order not to go extinct because of folium, Spica is a lot bigger. Altus herba. Altus herba, or Alterba, is much bigger than Brevis, and Alterba's leaves have widened and grown taller, now appearing more like stems. The leaves also now contain 2 seeds on each side. These seeds are really just spores contained in a gelatinous paste inside a hard shell. The leaves are also stronger and have a small blue hair-like structures on top of them, almost like new leaves are growing on top of these leaves. Acer herba. Acer is even more similar to Brevis than Spica, the only 2 differences being that Acer has thorns on top of its leaves, and it's a lot bigger. The second generation is made up of Magnum herba, Centis ex cultus, Minor spinae, Novus cols, Minor altus herba, and Minima herba. Magnum herba. Magnum is taller than previously. The leaves of Magnum end in a disc shape. Magnum only grows in swampy environments. Magnum can grow partially underwater. Centis ex cultus. Centis has thinner leaves and smaller thorns. This species is the second plant to be forced into Dux X's relationship. Centis acts as a barrier of sorts, preventing weaker or less persistent animals from getting to Avarium, only leaving the strong to carry the spores and seeds, or anyone who floats over the thorns and then eats the fruit. And unlike Avarium, Centis' tuberous roots are smooth at the end to allow Dux X to easily connect to their roots. And the Centis' fibrous root structure is far wider to gather more resources for the others. About 85% of Centis are connected with Dux X, while there's the lucky 15%. Minor spinae. Minor spinae, or spinor, has much smaller thorns at its base, but the leaves are taller and wider. Spinor hasn't evolved much from its first generation, and now suffers the fate of those who don't evolve, extinction due to being outcompeted. Novus cols. Novus has fully gone from the transition from tall leaves to true stems, hence the English name new stems. The top of Novus has more of the technical leaves fanning out elegantly. Each side of Novus has 2 additional seeds, and these seeds, instead of containing gelatinous spores, carries tiny forms of a plant in an undeveloped state. Though the seeds do still contain a lot of gelatinous paste, this paste is used to feed the growing plant in rough conditions. Novus can grow in a wide variety of environments due to its nature and shape, from hot savannas to cold tundras and everywhere in between. Novus can be found everywhere, and Novus is the dominant species. Minor altus herba. Minor altus, or Maltus, has less leaves, but these fewer leaves are bigger. Maltus also hasn't really evolved much, and with so many other plants to fight with, Maltus would lose the fight, going extinct from outcompetition. Minima herba. Minima has far less leaves than previously, and is perfectly suited to survive in the hot savannas. And when it gets too hot or dry, Minima will go through abscission, the act of losing parts of the plant in specific conditions. In Minima's case, it detaches the leaves when it gets too hot or dry. And to store enough resources to regrow its leaves after losing them and to survive in such hot conditions, Minima has that signature bulbous root structure of hot environment plants. And that marks the end of this episode of the Future Descendants from the Speculative Biology inside a McDonald's cup.